Mr. Speaker.
Manihara,
Apologise for interrupting Sir Roger Douglas. He was on a bit of a roll. He's laying down all of the solutions for Māori people for the next 100 years. Thank you very much, Sir Roger. Mr. Speaker, exactly 150 years ago to this very day, on the 3rd of August 1860, on behalf of a gathering of chiefs at Kohimarama in Auckland, Tamihana Te Rauparaha presented a petition to the Native Secretary asking that the Conference of the Māori Chiefs of New Zealand be established and made permanent. While at the other end of the country, the warship Victoria was coming into New Plymouth with the commander of the forces in Australia and his staff on board. So as we consider this appropriations bill today, which allocates extra funding over the next 3 years for treaty settlements, we are reminded to look to the lessons of our history to help set the guidelines for our future. A history in which 150 years ago today, Māori were looking to step up to the challenge of nationhood while the Crown was girding for war in the Taranaki. And it is in line with the importance of settling those historical treaty claims to help grow the Māori economy that the Māori Party supports the resourcing in this bill for extra staff to support treaty negotiations and treaty settlements, which many iwi and Māori entities are now using to unlock the potential value of the Māori asset base through further research and development. But we note that this bill is not the only thing we want to see in government's budget planning, as we also note that the treaty has far greater value to our society than just that of backstopping recent treaty claims. In 1970, Ngā Tamatoa's activism forced New Zealand to come to terms with Māori issues, particularly those related to the Treaty of Waitangi, and by 1974, Waitangi Day had become a national holiday. In 1975, Whenakupa led the Great Māori Land March to Wellington to protest the loss of millions of acres of Māori land in breach of the Treaty of Waitangi, which led directly to the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal. And it was Ngā Tamatoa who helped organise the petition to government which gave birth to the revitalisation of the Māori language, a taonga under Te Treaty o Waitangi, and the emergence of kohanga reo, which led to the emergence of kohanga reo in the early 80s. And if you were to ask the Minister of Māori Affairs, he'd tell you that although there's been significant progress made in the area of language revival, still it is not enough. Hence his announcement last week of a $250,000 review of the Māori language sector to update the Māori language strategy and to ensure that government expenditure on the reo was meeting Māori aspirations. Again, a great move and one that we fully support. And of course, Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me to forget to mention the Foreshore and Seabed March of 2004, which challenged government's intention to deny Māori rights to the foreshore and seabed enunciated under the Treaty of Waitangi, which gave rise to the Māori Party for whom I speak today. On another level, Mr. Speaker, just yesterday the Waitangi Tribunal released the second instalment of its report into the history of the conflict in Urewera, where they recommended return of part of the park to Tūhoe. And I am reminded that only a fortnight ago, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms of Indigenous Peoples, Professor James Anaya, respectfully urged the government to reconsider its decision to refuse to return the Urewera National Park to Tūhoe. And while I'm talking about Tūhoe, Mr. Speaker, I see that the Police Commissioner Howard Broad says he'd like to bring Tūhoe and the police together before he leaves next year. Although Tūhoe say it's unlikely the rift between the iwi and police will be resolved any time soon. And yet none of this is rocket science, Mr. Speaker. As Tūhoe negotiator Tāmati Kruger said, the basis of good relations between Māori and the Crown is goodwill and sincerity, the absence of which jeopardises the very basis of Te Treaty o Waitangi. In fact, those are also the very reasons why I drafted a bill to establish a parliamentary commissioner for the Treaty of Waitangi, to promote respect for the treaty as the nation's founding document and constitutional blueprint, and to review and investigate treaty-related issues, to provide information and analyses to the general public, promote respect for the treaty, and provide advice to Parliament on treaty issues. And if I could just add again, Mr. Speaker, was also the advice of the United Nations Special Rapporteur that the principles of the treaty provided a foundation for Māori self-determination as guaranteed under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, based on a real partnership between Māori and the Crown. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak to government's radical reshaping of our society to cope with the effects of a global recession and its failure to protect the most vulnerable in our society from its impact. A 2% lift in benefits will do nothing to help those already living on a knife edge, particularly during a period when GST has been increased, prices are going up, job losses have been huge, and economic recovery has been slow, particularly for Māori. The Māori Party remains committed to ensuring that Te Riti o Waitangi becomes a document that the whole country will one day see as the basis for good relationships between Māori and all others in Aotearoa, the source of sound environmental policies and practices, the footing for strong and positive growth in our economy, the background to the nation's commitment to eliminating poverty and addressing the injustices that limit the potential of a great sector of our society, and the foundation for a legal framework that encompasses tikanga Māori and Pākehā legal principles for the benefit of all New Zealanders. Kia ora tātou.